The morning sun touched the wide green fields that stretched across the land owned by one of the richest men in the state. His name was Ethan, and though the world saw him as a billionaire, those who worked for him knew that behind his calm, confident look, there was a man who carried a quiet kind of sadness. He lived on a farm that he had bought not for business but for peace. The city noise, the flashing lights, and endless meetings had taken too much from him, so he had decided to move away from all of it and live where things were simpler. He liked the silence, the sound of the wind moving through the trees and the smell of fresh grass in the morning, but what he didn't like was how lonely it all felt when the sun went down. People often said that Ethan had everything: cars, houses, companies, and power. But deep down he knew he had lost the only thing that ever made his life truly full: her. Years ago, he had fallen in love with a woman named Naomi. She was nothing like the people he usually met in business circles. She was calm, kind, and had a warmth in her voice that could make anyone feel safe. When he met her, he had no idea that she would become the center of his world. She taught him how to laugh again, how to see the small joys in life, and how to be human in a world that only cared about money. But their love hadn't lasted. Ethan's growing success came with pressure, and his family had never approved of her. They said she didn't fit into his world. The fight started small but turned painful. One day, Naomi packed her things and left without saying much. Ethan waited for her to return, thinking she just needed time, but days became months and months became years. Eventually, he stopped waiting. Still, there were nights when he couldn't sleep, when he would walk through the empty rooms of his mansion and feel like a stranger in his own life. He had everything, yet he felt like he had nothing. One afternoon after a long business trip, Ethan drove back to his farmhouse. The air smelled of fresh rain and the ground was soft under his shoes as he stepped out of his car. He felt tired, as he often did lately, and all he wanted was silence and maybe a cup of coffee on his porch. But as he walked down the dirt path leading to his house, he noticed someone standing near the gate. At first, he thought it was one of the workers, but as he came closer, he saw a woman. Her back was turned to him, her hair tied up neatly, and beside her were 3 small children, maybe 4 or 5 years old. The kids were laughing, pointing at something in the field. He slowed down, wondering who she was. Maybe she was lost, or maybe one of the staff's relatives. But when she turned around, his heart skipped a beat. It was Naomi. For a moment, Ethan froze. The world around him went quiet. His chest felt tight, and 100 memories rushed back at once: their laughter, their fights, the day she left. It had been years, but she looked just the same. Maybe a little older, maybe a little tired, but still beautiful in that natural, honest way he remembered. She looked at him too, her eyes wide, almost startled. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The children stopped playing and looked up at her, then at him. "Ethan," she finally said softly. He couldn't even find words. He took a step closer, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Then his gaze fell on the children again. There were 3 of them, 2 boys and 1 girl. Their hair was dark like his, their eyes a shade of brown that felt painfully familiar. One of the boys even had that same dimple on the left cheek, the same one he saw every time he looked in the mirror. It felt like the ground shifted beneath him. For a long moment, there was only silence between them. The wind moved gently through the trees, and the children, unaware of the storm building between the adults, began chasing butterflies nearby. What are you doing here?" he finally asked, his voice low, confused, a little angry even. Naomi looked down, avoiding his eyes. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said quietly. "I thought you still lived in the city." He crossed his arms, trying to steady his breathing. "This is my farm, and you're on it." "You should have known I'd be here." "I didn't know," she replied. "I came back to this town recently. I got a job nearby. I didn't plan to bother you." Ethan looked at her again, his eyes drifting to the children who now stood holding her hands. "And them?" he asked. "Who are they?" She didn't answer right away. Her lips trembled slightly. The little girl hid behind her leg, shyly peeking at him. "They're my children," she said after a pause. Something sharp twisted inside him. "Your children?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Naomi nodded. "Yes." He stared at her for a long time. The resemblance was undeniable. Every instinct in him screamed that there was something more she wasn't saying. But he couldn't push it, not yet. His heart was too full of confusion and shock to even know where to start. The oldest boy tugged at Naomi's dress. "Mama, who is he?" he asked in a small, curious voice. Naomi smiled faintly and said, "Just someone I used to know. Those words hit Ethan harder than he expected. Someone I used to know. That was all he was to her now. He nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in his throat. "You can't just show up here and expect me to pretend this is normal," he said. "If you need help, I'll find someone who can assist you. But I want to know why you're here." Naomi looked at the ground. "I didn't come for help. I came because I had no other place to stay for a while. The landlord where we were staying moved away and we needed something closer to my job. I didn't plan to ask you for anything. I just needed a safe place until I find another house." Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of exhaustion behind it, the kind that comes from years of struggling alone. Ethan didn't know what to say. Every part of him wanted to ask more, to ask if the children were his, where she had been, why she left. But something in her eyes told him not to. "Not yet." He took a slow breath and finally said, "There's a small cottage near the East Field. It's been empty for a while. You can stay there until you find something else." Naomi looked surprised. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "I know," he replied, "but I'm doing it anyway." Their eyes met again, and for a moment time seemed to stop. The years apart, the pain, the distance, all of it hung in the air between them. Then Naomi gave a small nod, whispered a quiet thank you, and walked away with the children. Ethan stood there long after they were gone, staring at the empty path. He felt like a ghost in his own world. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat by the window looking at the stars, the memories playing over and over in his mind. Every laugh they shared, every promise they made, every tear shed, it all came rushing back. And then there were the children. The way one of them tilted his head when curious, the way another bit his lip when nervous, it was all too familiar. It felt impossible yet undeniable. Could they really be his? He didn't know what to believe. But something inside him stirred, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. Hope, fear, regret, maybe all three. He realized that the peace he thought he'd found on his farm had just been shattered. And deep down, he wasn't sure if he wanted it back, because seeing Naomi again, after all those years, made him realize one painful truth. He had never stopped loving her, and now, she was here, back in his life with 3 children who looked just like him. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. He hadn't slept much the whole night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, the surprise in her eyes, and those 3 little children who looked far too much like him to be a coincidence. The house was quiet, but his mind wasn't. He kept replaying every moment from the day before, her voice, her hesitation, and the way she said, "Just someone I used to know." Those words had cut deep. He used to be her everything. Now he was just a stranger who happened to own the land she was standing on. He walked outside, the cool morning air brushing against his face. From the porch, he could see the small cottage on the east side of his property. A thin line of smoke rose from its chimney. She was already awake. He stood there for a long while, unsure of what to do. Part of him wanted to walk over, knock on the door, and demand the truth. But another part of him was scared, not of her, but of what she might say. By mid-morning, one of his workers came to tell him that the woman staying in the cottage had asked about helping with some chores on the farm. Ethan paused. "She asked for work?" "Yes, sir," the man replied. "She said she doesn't want to stay for free." Ethan nodded slowly. That sounded exactly like her, proud, independent, always wanting to stand on her own. Even now, after everything, she hadn't changed. "Tell her she can help with the sorting shed," Ethan said finally. "But make sure she's not overworked. She has kids to look after." That afternoon, he drove past the shed, pretending he was just checking on things. But his eyes couldn't help finding her. Naomi was wearing an old shirt and jeans, her hair tied back, and there was a gentle smile on her face as she worked. Every now and then, she looked over to check on the kids who were sitting on the grass nearby drawing shapes in the dirt with sticks. Ethan stayed inside his truck just watching. For years he had imagined what her life might be like if she had moved on, if she had found someone else. He never pictured this. Her working quietly, her children laughing on his land, and him sitting there too afraid to even speak. Later that evening, he found himself walking toward the cottage. He didn't plan to, but his feet just carried him there. The sun was going down, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The sound of the children's laughter filled the air. When Naomi saw him, she froze for a second, then smiled politely. "Evening?" she said, her tone cautious but kind. Evening, he replied, his hands in his pockets. How are the kids settling in? They're fine, she said, glancing toward them. They like the open space. It's peaceful here, he nodded. Good. There was an awkward pause. He looked around, trying to find the right words. You don't have to work, you know. The cottage is yours to use. No need to— I want to work, she interrupted gently. It's not right to live here without giving something back. Besides, I've always liked keeping busy. Ethan looked at her for a moment. You haven't changed, he said quietly. She smiled faintly, though there was sadness in her eyes. You have. That simple statement hit him harder than he expected. He didn't know whether she meant it as a compliment or something else. He looked at the kids again. The two boys were now racing each other, while the little girl was sitting in the grass picking flowers. They're good kids, he said. Naomi's face softened instantly. They are. They're my whole world. He hesitated, his throat tightening. Naomi, those kids. Before he could finish, she looked at him and her eyes told him to stop. Not now, Ethan, she said quietly. Please, he nodded, taking a small step back. All right, he said. Not now. He left soon after, but the questions kept spinning in his head. Every look, every smile, every small detail reminded him of himself. It wasn't just his imagination. There was something there, something she was still hiding. The next few days passed slowly. Naomi worked quietly, and Ethan kept his distance, though he always found himself nearby without meaning to. Sometimes he'd walk past the fields just to hear the kids' laughter. Other times he'd catch a glimpse of Naomi hanging laundry, her hair glowing in the sunlight. One afternoon, the sky turned dark and heavy with rain. The workers had already gone home when the storm began. Ethan was in his study reading when a knock came at his door. It was Naomi. She stood there soaked from the rain, her expression tense. I'm sorry to bother you, she said quickly, but the cottage roof started leaking. I've moved the kids to one side, but it's getting worse. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed his jacket. Come inside. Bring them here. I don't want to cause trouble, she said. You're not causing trouble, he replied firmly. Go get them. Within minutes, Naomi returned with the children, all shivering slightly from the cold rain. Ethan helped them inside, lighting the fireplace. The little girl climbed onto the couch and stared wide-eyed at the big room. Ethan brought them warm towels. Naomi thanked him quietly. For a while, the only sound was the rain hitting the windows. The children soon began to relax, playing softly near the fire. Naomi sat across the room, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea he'd made. You still take your tea the same way, he said softly, noticing she hadn't added any sugar. She smiled faintly. I guess some things don't change, he nodded. Some do. She looked up at him. You seem calmer, different. Maybe I just got tired of being angry, he said. After you left, I tried to bury myself in work. Built more companies, bought more land. But none of it felt right. I thought success would fill the space you left. It didn't. Naomi looked down, her fingers tightening around the cup. It wasn't supposed to happen the way it did, she said quietly. But I didn't know what else to do back then. He leaned forward slightly. You could have told me, Naomi. Whatever happened, we could have faced it together. Her eyes met his, full of something unspoken. Could we? She asked softly. You were already drifting away. Your family didn't want me around. Every time I came near, I could feel how much they resented me. I didn't want to become the reason you lost them. Ethan's jaw tightened. You were never the reason I lost anything. They were wrong about you. She gave a small, sad smile. Maybe, but I was tired of fighting. I needed peace, and I thought leaving was the only way to find it. They both fell silent. The fire crackled between them, the rain slowly easing outside. Then one of the boys ran up to Ethan holding a small toy truck. Can I play here? He asked. Ethan smiled and nodded. Of course, the boy grinned and ran off again. Ethan watched him go, then looked back at Naomi. He reminds me of someone, he said quietly. Naomi's gaze dropped to the floor, and she said nothing. When the storm finally passed, Ethan offered to drive them back to the cottage, but Naomi refused. We'll wait until morning, she said. It's warm here now. He agreed and brought extra blankets for the kids. As they settled in for the night, he stood by the window, watching the quiet rain outside. For the first time in years, the big house didn't feel empty. It felt alive again with laughter, warmth, and something else he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Before heading to bed, he looked over at Naomi, who had fallen asleep on the couch. The firelight flickered softly on her face. He remembered how peaceful she looked when she used to sleep beside him years ago. He never thought he'd see that again. He whispered to himself, "Maybe this is my second chance," but deep down he knew it wouldn't be that easy. There were still questions to be answered, secrets to uncover. As the rain faded and the house grew silent, Ethan made a quiet promise to himself. He would find out the truth about the past, about the children, and about why the woman he still loved had walked away without saying goodbye. The morning after the storm was calm and quiet. The air smelled fresh and the ground still held a touch of wetness. Ethan woke up earlier than usual. When he stepped out of his room, he saw the small shapes of the children curled up under blankets near the fireplace. Naomi sat nearby, her hair slightly messy, her eyes heavy with sleep, but she looked peaceful. For a moment, Ethan just stood there, taking in the sight. The warmth of that scene filled something in him that had been empty for years. It felt like a glimpse of a life that could have been, one he had once dreamed of but lost. When Naomi noticed him, she straightened up. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "We didn't mean to stay the whole night. I just didn't want to wake them." "It's fine," he said softly. "You can stay as long as you need. The storm was bad. I wouldn't have wanted you to go back anyway." She nodded quietly and began gathering their things. Ethan went to the kitchen and made breakfast for everyone. When he brought out the plates, Naomi looked surprised. "You still cook?" she asked with a faint smile. "Sometimes," he said. "Old habits." The children joined them at the table. They were shy at first, but soon their curiosity took over. One of the boys asked if he owned all the land outside. Ethan chuckled and said, "Yes, but the animals think they own most of it." That made them laugh, and for a few minutes the kitchen filled with sound and warmth. Naomi smiled quietly, watching the kids laugh. Ethan noticed how her eyes softened every time she looked at them. After breakfast, Ethan offered to drive them back to the cottage. On the way, the kids pointed excitedly at the horses and cows. The little girl asked if she could ride one someday. Ethan smiled. "If your mother agrees, I'll teach you myself." Naomi looked at him from the passenger seat. There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Hesitation, maybe even trust, but she didn't say anything. Days passed, and slowly, the awkwardness between them began to fade. Naomi started helping more around the farm, and the children often played near the house. Ethan found himself waiting for those little moments, seeing Naomi laugh, hearing the children call out to each other. One afternoon, he came home early from town. He saw Naomi sitting under a tree near the field, watching the sunset. The kids were running around, their laughter echoing across the open land. He walked over quietly. "You always liked watching the sunset," he said. She smiled without looking at him. "It reminds me that no matter how bad a day feels, it still ends beautifully." He nodded, taking a seat beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just watched the golden light fade behind the hills. "Do you ever think about the past?" he asked softly. "All the time," she said. "Sometimes I wish I could change how things ended." He looked at her carefully. "Why did you really leave, Naomi? I need to know." "I've asked myself that question 1,000 times and nothing ever made sense." She turned to him, her expression calm but sad. "Do you really want to know?" "Yes," he said quietly. She sighed, her hands tightening on her knees. It wasn't just the arguments or the pressure. It was everything that came with it. The way your mother looked at me like I was stealing her son. The way people whispered that I didn't belong beside you. I tried to ignore it, but it became too heavy. And then that night when she came to see me, Ethan frowned. "My mother came to see you?" Naomi nodded slowly. "She told me that if I truly loved you, I would let you go. She said your business was at a turning point and that being with me would only hold you back." I didn't believe her at first, but then she showed me those papers. Contracts, deals you were about to lose because of all the noise around our relationship. She made me think I was destroying your future. Ethan's heart sank. "That's not true," he said, his voice low. "None of that was true." "I didn't know that," Naomi said softly. "I was scared, Ethan. You were under so much pressure already. I didn't want to make it worse. So I walked away." He stared at her, his jaw tight. "And you never told me. You just left." I tried, she said quietly. I wrote a letter, but I never sent it. I thought maybe you'd be better off without me. Ethan leaned back, running a hand through his hair. You should have trusted me, Naomi. You should have known I would have chosen you. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't trust myself either. Everything was falling apart and I didn't know how to fix it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the wind and the laughter of the children filled the silence. Finally, Ethan said quietly, And the kids? Were they born after you left? Naomi hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly. Yes, she whispered. He looked at her, his chest tightening. Naomi, are they mine? She looked up at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, Ethan, she said softly. They're yours. He froze. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His eyes moved toward the children running in the distance, their faces, their laughter, their energy. He saw himself in every one of them. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice breaking. I wanted to, she said. But after I left, I thought you'd hate me for what I did. When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know what to do. I had no one. Your mother made it clear I wasn't welcome in your world, so I did the only thing I could. I raised them on my own. I worked, I struggled, but I made sure they were safe. Ethan's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. You shouldn't have gone through that alone, he said. You shouldn't have had to. Naomi wiped her face, her voice trembling. I did what I had to do, and despite everything, I don't regret raising them. They're my biggest blessing. But every time I look at them, I see you, and that's the part that still hurts. Ethan looked away, his chest heavy with regret. He wanted to be angry, but he couldn't. The pain in her voice told him everything, how hard those years had been for her. I missed so much, he said quietly. Their first steps, their first words. Everything, Naomi nodded slowly. You did. But you can still be part of their lives now. If you want to. He looked at her, his eyes full of something between sorrow and determination. I do, more than anything. The air between them grew soft again. The sun had almost disappeared, leaving a warm glow in the sky. Naomi stood up, brushing the grass from her jeans. It's getting late. I should take them inside. Ethan rose too. Naomi, he said gently, thank you. For telling me. She gave a faint smile. You deserve to know. As she walked away, leading the children toward the cottage, Ethan stayed where he was, watching. His mind was full of memories, of her, of their love, of everything that might have been different if only they'd trusted each other more. When the kids turned back to wave goodnight, he waved too, his heart full yet aching. That night, he didn't sleep again. He sat by his window, looking out over the quiet land, thinking of how life had brought them back together in the strangest way. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about business or wealth. He was thinking about the years he had lost and the family he never knew he had. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Naomi's words. For years, he had built walls around his heart, telling himself that the past was gone and he had moved on. But now that he knew the truth, every wall he had carefully built started to crumble. The next morning, he walked out to the fields where the workers were fixing fences. But instead of giving orders like he usually did, he found himself distracted. His eyes drifting toward the east cottage again and again. He knew she was there with the children. He wanted to see them, but he didn't know how to face them after everything he had missed. By noon, he decided to stop over. When he arrived, Naomi was in the garden, kneeling in the dirt as she planted small flowers along the path. The children were nearby, laughing as they helped her. When they noticed Ethan walking up, the little girl ran to him first. Look, she said proudly, showing him her tiny, muddy hands. We're planting flowers. Ethan smiled, kneeling to her level. You're doing a wonderful job, he said. They'll make this place look beautiful. She grinned and ran back to her brothers. Naomi looked up at him, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. They've been restless since morning, she said with a small smile. I thought gardening might help. It's working, Ethan replied. They seem happy, she nodded. They usually are. Kids don't carry the same kind of heaviness adults do. They just live. He watched her for a moment. You've done a good job, Naomi. They're smart and kind. You should be proud, her eyes softened. I am. There was a long silence. The only sound was the laughter of the children and the soft rustling of the leaves. Finally, Ethan said quietly, I want to be part of their lives. If you'll let me. Naomi's hands froze for a moment, then she looked up at him. They've already grown attached to you, she said softly. They don't know the truth yet. I didn't want to confuse them. He nodded slowly. They deserve to know. When you're ready, we can tell them together. Naomi sighed. It's not that simple, Ethan. I don't want them to get hurt. They've never had a father before. If you come into their lives, they'll look up to you. I need to know you're not going to walk away again. Her words cut deep, but he didn't turn away. I won't, he said firmly. You have my word. Over the next few weeks, Ethan kept his promise. He spent more time at the cottage helping the kids with small things, teaching them how to feed the animals, showing them how to ride a pony, and reading stories with them by the porch at sunset. Every day, the distance between them grew smaller. The children quickly began to trust him. They followed him around the farm, asking endless questions about everything they saw. The little girl would often hold his hand as they walked, while one of the boys started copying the way Ethan spoke. Naomi noticed all of it, and though she was cautious at first, she couldn't deny that it made her heart soften. One evening, as the children slept, Naomi stood outside the cottage, staring at the stars. Ethan walked up quietly beside her. They're wonderful, he said softly. You've raised them well. She smiled faintly. I did my best. It wasn't easy, but they made it worth it. He nodded, his gaze still on the sky. Naomi, I want to make things right. I don't care how long it takes. I missed too much already. She looked at him. People change, Ethan. You've built a different life now. I'm not asking for anything. I just want peace for them. He turned to her, his voice low but steady. Peace is all I want too, but maybe we can find it together. For a moment, she didn't answer. The night breeze moved softly through her hair. She finally said, You make it sound simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, he said. I'm not asking you to forget the past, just give me a chance to show you who I am now. Her eyes lingered on his face. There was a time she would have trusted him without question. But time changes people and pain builds walls. Still, a small part of her wanted to believe him. The next morning, Ethan's mother arrived at the farm unannounced. She stepped out of her car in a crisp dress, her eyes sharp and cold as always. Ethan wasn't surprised to see her. But Naomi, who was carrying a basket of laundry, froze when she saw the older woman walking toward them. Well, his mother said coolly, glancing at Naomi. It seems you found your way back. Naomi stood still, trying to stay calm. Good morning, she said politely. His mother's lips tightened. You've caused enough damage in this family once. I hope you don't plan to do it again. Before Naomi could respond, Ethan stepped between them. That's enough, he said firmly. His mother frowned. You can't possibly be serious about letting her stay here, with those children after everything that happened. I am serious, Ethan said. And those children are mine. For the first time, his mother's expression cracked. Yours? She said, her voice rising slightly. Yes, he said, his tone steady. And if you can't accept that, then maybe you shouldn't come here anymore. Naomi stood in shock. She had never seen him speak to his mother that way before. His mother turned to her son, her eyes full of disbelief. You're making a mistake, Ethan. You always let your heart blind you. He shook his head. Maybe, but I'm not letting it happen again. Without another word, she turned and walked back to her car, her heels clicking sharply on the stone path. Naomi watched in silence until the car disappeared down the road. When Ethan turned to her, she said softly, You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, he replied. You've spent enough years being pushed away. No one's doing that to you again. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. You've changed, she whispered. He gave a small smile. Maybe losing everything taught me what really matters. That night, Naomi sat alone after the children had gone to bed. The scene kept replaying in her mind, the way he stood up for her, the way his voice didn't shake even once. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt since the day she left him. Safety. The next few days felt lighter. Naomi began to relax more. She laughed again, not the polite laughter she used to hide behind, but real laughter, the kind that comes when your heart starts to heal. Ethan noticed it every time, and it filled him with quiet joy. One evening, as the sky turned pink, Naomi found Ethan in the barn fixing a broken gate. She leaned against the doorway, watching him work. You always liked doing things yourself, she said playfully. He smiled. Some things never change. There was a pause. Then she said softly, Thank you for standing up for me. You didn't have to, but you did. He looked up, meeting her eyes. I didn't do it out of kindness, Naomi. I did it because you're my family. All of you are. Her heart skipped a beat at those words. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. I don't know where this goes, she said quietly. I don't want to rush anything. He nodded. We don't have to rush. I just want a chance to be part of your lives to make things right. She smiled gently. Then maybe. We can try. The words hung between them, soft but full of meaning. Outside, the children's laughter echoed through the fields again, and Ethan looked toward the sound with a peaceful expression. For the first time in years, everything felt right. The past had been painful, but the future, for once, didn't feel impossible. It felt like a chance, a second chance, and this time he wasn't going to waste it. He made a decision that night. He wasn't going to let them slip away again. Days turned into weeks, and life on the farm began to find a new rhythm. The cottage that once stood quiet was now full of laughter, footsteps, and the sound of children running around. Ethan had slowly become part of their daily life, not as a stranger or visitor, but as someone who belonged there. Every morning he would wake before sunrise, feed the animals, and check the fences. By the time Naomi and the children came out, the air was already filled with the smell of fresh hay and morning dew. The little ones would race to meet him, and he'd always have something ready for them. A ride on the horse, a story about the old barn, or just a smile that told them he was happy to see them. Naomi watched all of this quietly. There was something healing in seeing him with their children. For so long she had carried the burden alone, every sleepless night, every worry about the future, every tear she had hidden from the kids. Now, for the first time, she wasn't alone anymore. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan decided to take them all to the nearby town fair. The children could hardly contain their excitement. They had never been to one before, and everything was new, the lights, the music, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy. Ethan carried the youngest boy on his shoulders while the other two ran ahead, their laughter echoing through the crowd. Naomi walked beside him, smiling softly. For a moment it felt almost like old times, before the distance, before the misunderstandings, before everything fell apart. They spent the afternoon playing games, riding the carousel and watching a small parade pass through the town square. Ethan bought them ice cream, and when the youngest smeared it all over his face, everyone burst into laughter. It was simple and ordinary, but to them it felt like something rare, a piece of happiness they had all been missing. That evening, as they drove back, the children fell asleep in the back seat, their heads resting against each other. The radio played softly, and the road stretched long and quiet under the fading light. Naomi turned slightly, watching them with a tender look. They've never been this happy, she whispered. Ethan glanced at her. They deserve it, he said. You all do, she smiled faintly. It's strange, isn't it? How life can turn in ways we never expect. He nodded. Yeah, I used to think success was everything, but now I'd trade all of it just to have moments like this. When they reached the farm, Ethan carefully carried the sleeping children inside. Naomi watched him as he tucked them into bed, his movements gentle, almost careful, like he was afraid of waking them. Afterward, they stepped outside again, standing by the porch as the crickets sang in the distance. The night was quiet, the sky clear. Naomi spoke first. You're good with them, she said softly. They adore you, he smiled. I adore them too. She hesitated, then asked, Do you ever regret how things happened between us? He looked down for a moment before answering. Every day. I was foolish, Naomi. I thought building a fortune would make me happy, but it only made me lonely. I lost sight of what mattered most, and by the time I realized it, I had already lost you. Her eyes softened. You didn't just lose me, Ethan, you lost yourself for a while. But people change. I've changed too, he nodded. I know, I see it in you. You're stronger now, more certain of who you are. I wish I'd known how to appreciate that before. There was silence between them for a while. Then Naomi said, Maybe what matters isn't what we lost, but what we still have. Ethan looked at her, his voice quiet. Do you think we could start again? Not from where we left off, but from where we are now. She took a deep breath, her eyes searching his face. I don't know what the future holds, she said slowly. But I know one thing, you're here now. You're trying, and that means something. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Over the next few months, their bond grew stronger. They didn't rush anything. There were no grand promises or dramatic confessions, just small, steady steps toward something real. Ethan learned how to be a father, not in the way money could teach, but through moments that truly mattered. He helped the children with their lessons, taught them how to plant seeds in the soil, and listened to their endless stories. Sometimes they would sit around the fire, and the kids would ask questions about when he and their mother first met. Naomi would laugh softly and tell them stories from years ago, about the small apartment they shared when they were young, about how Ethan couldn't cook to save his life, about the dreams they used to whisper late at night. The children loved those stories. They made them feel connected, like their family had always been destined to find its way back together. One morning, just before spring, Ethan was standing by the barn when the children came running up to him. Holding something behind their backs. "Close your eyes," the oldest said. Grinning from ear to ear, Ethan laughed and did as he was told. He heard them giggling and shuffling around before one of them said, "Okay, open." When he did, they were holding a small framed picture, a drawing they had made together. It showed all 5 of them standing in front of the farm, the sun shining above. The figures were a little uneven and messy, but in the center the word family was written in bright red letters. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He crouched down, pulling them into a hug. "It's perfect," he said softly. "Thank you." Naomi stood a few feet away, watching with tears in her eyes. She didn't say anything, but in that moment she knew something had shifted forever. That evening, Ethan took the picture and hung it in his study. It was the first thing he saw every morning, and the last thing he looked at before bed. For the first time in years, the house felt like a home, but life wasn't suddenly perfect. There were still hard days, moments of doubt, of worry, of trying to rebuild what had been lost. Yet through it all, they faced everything together. One rainy afternoon, Naomi found Ethan sitting on the porch watching the storm. She sat beside him quietly, and after a moment he said, "You know, I used to hate the rain. I thought it ruined everything I planned. But now it just feels peaceful." She smiled. "Maybe because you finally stopped trying to control everything." He laughed softly. "Maybe." They sat there for a while, listening to the sound of the rain hitting the roof. Then he turned to her. "Naomi, there's something I want to ask you." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple ring. "I don't expect things to go back to what they were," he said quietly. "But I'd like to build something new with you, with them. No rush, no expectations, just love and honesty this time." Naomi stared at him, tears welling up in her eyes. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she nodded, a soft smile spreading across her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's build something new." The rain kept falling, gentle and steady like a quiet blessing. Months later, as spring filled the farm with life again, Ethan stood by the same field where he had first seen her return. Only this time she wasn't a stranger standing by the gate. She was home. The children ran through the grass, their laughter carried by the wind. Naomi stood beside him, her hand in his. He looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Do you ever think about how strange life is?" She smiled back. "Strange, but beautiful." He nodded, his gaze moving to the horizon. "I used to think I had everything when I had money. But now I know. I didn't have anything until I had you all back." Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "Then don't let it go this time," he smiled. "I won't." And as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the sound of the children's laughter filled the air again. The farm, once a place of silence and regret, had become a home full of love, warmth, and second chances. And for the first time in a long, long time, Ethan knew. He wasn't just living anymore. He was finally alive.